Oh, here we go. It's the video.
Hello, I'm Eric Matisik, co-chair of Denver Startup Week. Last year, we were able to bring the global audience together for Denver Startup Week, and this year, we're excited to welcome that global audience back as we celebrate and showcase the best of entrepreneurship that the Denver ecosystem in Colorado has to offer, in Denver and beyond. There are lots to explore this week, but most importantly, we're excited that you're joining us. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make Denver Startup Week possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our headquarters and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life, Capital One Cafe, the Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork, and our track sponsors who've made all the great content you're hearing today possible, which includes our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, our growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, design track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works, people track sponsor Exactly, and the spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing this excitement to the entire week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and the VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our sponsors and member sponsors who are listed on the screen, and thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Welcome to this session of Denver Startup Week. I'm Kurt Roberts, a partner at Kickstart Fund. We're on a mission to build great companies in the Wild West by backing the boldest entrepreneurs with capital, community, and expertise for the journey. A lot of venture capitalists happen to invest in Colorado. At Kickstart, we focus on it. We love our Colorado startups, Sondermine, Nomad, Pomp, and Havenly, to name just a few. Because we were among the first seed funds in the region, we know what it's like to start something before others understand the vision, which means we're willing to lead investments in promising teams. We use our experience to grow your startup and recruit top talent. Our portfolio community is filled with visionary founders like you who are committed to moving the whole ecosystem together. It's the network effect in full effect. Raising venture capital is more than swapping shares for money. It's inviting the right investors to complement your team. We hope we'll be your choice for seed funding in the Mountain West, and we hope you enjoy this session.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Olivia, the Founder Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Before we get started, the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the original owners of the land on which we reside, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, stolen land, forced removal, and forced occupation of their territory. And we honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and all other Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There's something for everyone at DSW, thanks to all of our community members who submitted their best content to make this week what it is. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all, especially our founder track sponsor, Kickstart. With that, please enjoy this session and the entire week ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Please make sure that you think about questions that you would like to ask this panel at the end. Go ahead and think about what you want to ask so that we have some more questions. Anywho, my name is Zulieth Coleman. I am a UX researcher and technical writer for Creative Cloud's Copy. And we're just going to start off by introducing our panel. With us today, we have Chris Franks, who was the CEO of Real Good Technologies. And we also have Chris Martinez, who was the CEO for Wrangler. And then we have Rosie Cutrer, who was the CEO for Supward Dog.
Good morning.
Good morning. So definitely just want to start off with just a broad overview of what your companies were about, how you got started, and whoever wants to start first, please go ahead, take it away.
I'll go. So Time Wrangler was meant to be a scheduling management software where you put in everything that you had to get done that day and roughly how long it would take you. And it was supposed to comb through your schedule and find all the gaps in between your meetings and put all those tasks in there so that you could get everything done that you actually needed to. It worked technically, but I couldn't find a single person to ever try to use it.
Chris Franks, the company, it's hard to choose just one company that I fucked up because having fucked up, oh, Rosie, your shadow. But Real Good Technologies is probably the greatest crash and burn story. And that was a company that started off in the political space doing text messages for political campaigns. We ended up being a little bit more of a technology platform for political campaigns. But yeah, it was good until it wasn't. We can dig in if you want.
Good morning. So I'm Rosie The Shadow. Actually, I'm working from home, so I think I'm a little dark right now. But my startup venture was Supward Dog, which was stand-up paddleboard yoga. So nothing technical whatsoever. It really came from a passion and a vision I had. It's probably all startups do, right? Of an idea to take stand-up paddleboards out into our secured bay here in California. And I thought everybody would be flooding to the idea. It was very much a niche at the time, but it really didn't go as planned. Great name, kind of a cool concept, but I didn't really have the long-term business plan that I needed in place to really keep the business afloat, so to speak.
Well, I do want to ask, I have a bunch of good questions to ask you all. And I'm curious, what do you think led to just the crash of the actual startup? Where do you think you went wrong?
I could go first on that one because I think I had a lot of things that went wrong. I'm sure all of us can speak on that actually, but for myself, with stand-up paddleboard yoga specifically, I wasn't in a lake. I wasn't in really a protected harbor. I was in the ocean. I really didn't take a lot of factors into consideration of how that would affect the business per se, such as wind, swell. Somebody had been attacked by a shark in the area only a couple of years prior, not realizing that would probably scare everybody to not want to just jump on my stand-up paddleboard and drift down to the ocean aimlessly. So there was a lot of flaws to the plan to start with. On top of that, just those kind of, environmental factors, I really didn't have a strong marketing plan of how I was going to continue to promote my business. Initially, there was a lot of buzz in the community. I was on a news segment. I was in the newspaper. I had some big players in town that were really supporting my business locally, but I didn't have a long-term plan to keep spreading the word. And ultimately, I feel like that was the downfall on top of the sharks and all the other things, but that was the ultimate nail in the coffin.
Rosie, I do want to ask you a follow-up question. What do you think makes for a good marketing plan?
I think you really need to have a multi-prong approach. Just for anybody who doesn't know the Chris's, as well as I do have the pleasure of working with them both at CleverFunnel /Deebly, and we are a marketing company. And I think what had really come out of my experience is obviously just knowing how important it is to have marketing as a part of your business. I'm the customer success manager at the company, so I work very closely with the startups that we work with, and not so much that I relay my previous issues to them, but I think because I had those struggles, I feel like I have a really deep passion and understanding for what they're going through. You put your last penny into your businesses at some time. You really want them to be successful. You do have a vision, you are passionate. But from what I've seen within our company, really a multi-pronged approach to marketing, be it digital marketing, social media marketing, email marketing, et cetera, really is the way to go. Just wanting one silver bullet with one thing is not really going to be what's going to get you a Tesla tomorrow. You definitely need to have a little bit more going on than that.
Thank you, Rosie. My next question is, whoever wants to answer this one, is there any way to protect yourself from any bad players? Sometimes when we're in the startup business, we want to protect our technology or have some privacy measures. Is there anything that you could do to do that?
I mean, this is probably the right one for me. I'm just going to start crying a little bit as I say this. It's okay, you guys, it's fine, it's fine. So yeah, the backstory is, and it's sort of, I've talked about a lot at Denver Founders and Startup Week down through the years, but we built a fairly successful company. It was just getting off the ground, and a guy came in and decided he wanted to buy that company. And a couple of things that I didn't know was, well, I'll get to the lessons learned in a second. But like somebody comes in and is like, "Hey, I want to buy this company." It's like more than $1 million. That's a shit ton of money, right? Like, holy crap, this is going to be great. So we went through the process of selling, we showed them our books, they do due diligence, they signed this letter, we had a contract that was ready to go, and we were sitting around the day that the first tranche of money was supposed to be coming in. We were sitting and hitting refresh on our Wells Fargo business checking account, waiting for the wire, the money to hit the account. And to make a very long and painful story short, the money never came. And through 3 rounds of a federal lawsuit, including collections and bankruptcy, we never saw a dime for that business. Subsequently, we found out that that company that bought us took that technology and made millions. I'm not kidding, millions of dollars for that, and never paid us for that technology. And so the lessons learned, there's so many lessons learned there that are reasonable to talk about. But one of the things that from all the panels I've ever been on and all the things, nobody once ever told me, if somebody comes and says, "I'd like to buy your company, can I see your books, please?" You say, "I am so happy you're here. May I see yours as well?" And any reasonable company, particularly private company, we're like, "Oh yeah, sure. We've got tons of cash in the balance sheet. That's why we're doing that." Right. I didn't have enough sort of wisdom or forethought to do that. There was 75 mistakes we made between then and ultimately, getting nothing. At one point, our compensation was a bunch of voice over IP phones, which, I mean, you guys all know how popular voice over IP phones are now. Like, you all have one, right? No, I don't think you can give them away at this point. But so the lessons learned, yes, for that. But I think more importantly along that pathway is that I let, for lack of a better word, my greed and wanting to sell the company, even though that I knew we weren't the place where we were trying to get to, outweigh a bad feeling that I had about the transaction in the first place and about the business partner, the person that was coming in to buy our business. Yeah. So if you want to hear the whole story, you can come to Denver Founders or just find me someplace and buy me a tequila, and I'll cry a little bit and I'll tell you the whole story.
Thank you for sharing that painful story, Chris. I can't imagine how stressful that was. Just terrible, horrible. It's really great that you're sharing that, though, to hopefully help anybody going through that process kind of not make those same mistakes. Chris Martinez, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When it comes to your business, was there anything that you could have done to prevent from the business falling apart? Is there anything now that you can look back on and think, okay, I would have done A, B, and C?
So I think the biggest mistake I made, and it goes back to that old saying of when your only tool is a hammer, your every problem becomes a nail. And I came from a software development background. So in my mind, the thing that had to happen first is a working piece of software. I never bothered to consider validating my idea. I never bothered to advertise it, because clearly this entire problem would have been solved if I just built the platform and it worked, and everyone would somehow magically find
Flock
it
to you.
and start using it immediately. I probably, well, I can tell you that I had, let's see, what's 52 times 3? 156 people who told me to my face that it was a really great idea and they would definitely try it. And I know because I used to use playing cards as business cards. And so I gave out 3 decks worth of playing cards to people who all told me that I had a great idea and that they would definitely check it out. And the link was right on there. But I was measuring usage on the app, and literally no one other than myself ever once tried to use it. But I never bothered to figure out why, or even if it's because no one had the problem. All I did was keep working on the software. And so I wouldn't do that. Definitely don't recommend that. I would say more than anything, just validate your idea. That's the biggest thing. It probably wouldn't have saved that, other than it would have saved me a year of basically spinning my wheels.
So my follow-up question is, what is the best way to validate your idea?
Yeah. So one, don't actually build a working product till someone says they need it. But just build a quick, cheap, easy website, something like that, that describes it in detail, or a reasonable amount of detail. Have a sign up now or a buy now button. Run as much cheap ad traffic as you can to that website. Ask, again, every person who you run across to visit the website. And when they click that button, have some kind of email sign up form or something that says, hey, this product's still in development, join the wait list. And then you can measure how many people actually show interest, how many people click that button, how many, is it enough to actually use the time, money, energy to build your product into something that works.
Those are really great tips. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
My next question is involved around having a business partner. I'm curious if any of you had business partners that you were working with for these companies, and if you did, was there anything that you could have done different, maybe choosing a different business partner or just having a better team member for your startup?
You want me to go? Okay, fine. I'm fond of telling people that, so the provocative question to the room, all 60 of you sadists that want to hear about our failures, is easier to get a divorce or to dissolve a business? What do you guys think? Like, you don't have to do it. Just in your mind, like, hey, it's way easier to dissolve a business, right? It's a simple little thing. Divorce involves kids and all that sort of stuff. Bullshit. It is way easier to get a divorce, split, even if you have lots of property, all that sort of stuff. Those laws are pretty well settled, right? Pretty easy. You go to court, they figure it out, they divide it. Even if it's hairy, they have like systems involved with that. When you start a business with somebody, you're married to that person without really the possibility of divorce. Particularly if you're an early stage company, you don't have a bunch of money and all that sort of stuff, and you can't buy the other person out or things like that. It is a brutally difficult thing to separate a business partnership. So my advice for anybody, and again, this comes from having fucked this up like multiple times in my life, is to make really damn sure that you want to be with that person through thick and thin. Now, I know that we're talking about failure, but I know all of your businesses are just awesome, right? Like, nobody's got down. Running a business is super, super hard. Having a business partner who may not react to stress in the same way you react to stress can cause a shit ton of tension. Those relationships are critically important, and getting them right are critically important. And here's a hint: like, you're not going to always like that person. There's going to be time they piss you off. There's like, I've heard this whole thing kind of recently about founders therapy now. Like, people are going to therapy together to try to get that relationship right. I think that's good. I think it's great. Investing in that relationship, investing in an open, honest, communicative relationship with your co-founder is as important, in my opinion, as investing in your marriage or your relationship. It is so important. So, last piece of advice, and I'll shut up, but is date before you get married. I'm not shitting you. Like, I've known people that have started companies because they met at Denver Founders, like that night. And they're like, tomorrow, let's start a company. Yay. You're married to that person. You're locked. You're like, you are now together for life. Make darn sure, spend some time together, do a couple projects together, work this close, like physically close together for a really long time, to make sure that I have good personal hygiene and, shower on a regular basis, because that would be really bad if you had a stinky business partner. But that being said, when you get it right, like Chris and I are business partners, when you get it right, it's so much more gratifying to have somebody that is in it with you and that you don't feel quite as alone. Lots of words. Sorry about that.
That was really helpful. Thank you for sharing, Chris. I have a follow-up question. So when you're looking for a business partner, are there specific traits that people should be looking for outside of, you mentioned you should maybe deal with stress in similar ways and spend time together, but how do you actually find a business partner? Where would someone go to do that and build that trust?
It's a great question. So the first one is, and this is because I come from a mildly technical background, not like Martinez, but one of the old jokes was a group of guys to be sitting around, and they're sort of the business or the sales or the other side of being a founder. And they're sitting around a room being like, man, if I could only find my technical co-founder, I could get this idea off the ground. There's another room across town where there's a bunch of engineers sitting around drinking a beer being like, man, if I only had a great idea to hack on, I would be awesome. Like, we could go create this thing. So the first thing is you got to get out there. I know in the world of COVID, that's very, very difficult. But one of the real themes of the Denver startup community is to show up at events that you like. Show up at technical events if you're non-technical. Show up at more sort of founder-led events if you're technical and are looking for co-founders. Build relationships. It is there's some groups, like Co-Founder Labs was a group that used to be in Denver, that try to kind of hack that together, but nothing really gets in the way of forming and building a relationship with somebody. So there's no easy way to do it. In the case of Martinez and I, and people that I have swiped left,
and the founders and the comments.
Yeah, that's our next product. You guys, 62 of you guys gonna want to be co-founders? It's cool. We've never met. Let's just start a company together. It'll be like founder tender. But building a relationship with somebody that's based on trust, etc. The other thing is, and I think this is getting to the heart of the first part of your question is, you really need to determine, and I'm going to make it sound like the grit factor, but it's the personal risk factor associated with your co-founder. And so if you have, and I'm making this stuff up, like when I started my first company, I had 2 kids, a wife, and a mortgage, right? My ability to fail was less than a kid that was living in his mom's basement. 22-year-old right out of college, right? Like those are different risk parameters. A lot of the tension from co-founders comes when one person's like, dude, I have to get a fucking paycheck. I have to. I have a mortgage.
Right.
My wife's going to leave me. Like, no shit. I've heard that. My house will be foreclosed on. And the other guy's like, no, we just have to grind. We got to grind. It's got, another 3 months, we're going to get that beta out. And that's going to be the thing where we're going to get funding. Operating agreement for sure. That's also fucked that one up too, Dave. They have a really firm operating agreement in place so that your relationship is formalized as well. Is that helpful?
That is really helpful. Would you mind just elaborating really quickly on what an operating agreement is?
Yeah, great point. So an operating agreement is this magical piece of paper that's legally binding that says how you're going to behave. It's fantastic. And so it primarily talks about how the company is going to operate. But one of the really most powerful things about an operating agreement is that it talks about what will happen when things go bad. Things will go bad. Very rarely they don't. An operating agreement is there to structure those conversations. I'll give you an example. So Chris and I own each a portion of CleverFunnel. And what if I decided tomorrow that I'm going to go grow dreadlocks? Don't laugh. I'm going to grow dreadlocks and then go on and follow around fish for the summer, right? And just not work. I own a majority of the company. What is Chris going to do? That's what an operating agreement is there. It's like, hey man, you got to actually work. If you don't work, we can remove you. Like there's rules around that sort of stuff.
I think those rules are really great. So my next question, and it just goes into the legalities of the business. Were there any other legal forms, paperwork, the way the business was set up that you could have also invested in, or maybe you didn't think about that could have helped you from burning the startup down into the ground?
I don't think, well, it's again, if no one's using your product, you don't really have to worry about any kind of legal trouble. I think that honestly, people kind of over-index on and I'm sure there's some lawyer right now, possibly my own, if you're watching, Mike, who is about to plan my murder for saying this. But people really over-index on the legal angle. They worry about that before they worry about, like, oh, I need to get this patented. Well, do you even have something worth stealing yet? Probably not, if we're completely honest with ourselves. Patents and copyrights are incredibly expensive, especially patents. Patents are tens of thousands of dollars just to apply. Tens of thousands of dollars you almost certainly don't have, and you probably, again, don't yet have something worth stealing.
And also this notion that, like, hey, I've got a patent that's protectable. This is
a patent.
Yeah, this is a really hard fucking lesson, but I learned this was real good. You know what contracts are? Only as good as your ability to enforce said contract.
Right.
And so somebody steals your shit. If you don't, like, well, I've got a patent. I've got IP wrapped up. Great. Do you have the money to enforce that? Do you have the money to sue them in long drawn out lawsuits? Like, users and the ability to find traction is way more important than that. Then, when you're super successful, then you can get a patent.
Thank you for clarifying for the audience. My next question is, were there any factors that you had no control over that contributed to the company failure?
I would honestly say to that what I had just kind of mentioned prior, right? Like when you have environmental factors, for me, I know it's not, probably in the same world as tech to some degree, there's going to be a lot of things that just kind of come up that you don't anticipate, like, both Chris's had mentioned. But for me, I really didn't plan out the environmental potential hazards that were coming in. Those things I just couldn't control. I can't control the wind as badass of a woman as I think I am. That's just not an ability I have, nor the swell. So, some of those factors, but that was an important thing in retrospect that I really did need to take into consideration. I think sometimes when we start a business, we get so caught up with the idea, with the novelty of being a business owner and an entrepreneur. And we sometimes don't have the foresight to look at the bigger picture of how some of these things are going to impact our business in a true and real way. And that was definitely an issue for me.
Yeah, but let's all be like, your business was killed by sharks. That's the coolest reason ever for a startup to fail.
That is true. That is way cooler.
Can you also say that
users.
maybe those sharks had lasers on them too?
Luckily, nobody got killed by sharks while they're on my paddleboard. That, if we're talking about legalities, was definitely,
Yeah, there's not enough.
definitely a blessing for me.
Is shark insurance a thing?
Okay, we're gonna open up the questions up for the audience. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them into the chat. And then also please take note that if you want to find Chris Martinez or Chris Franks or Rosie Cutrer or myself, we have our linked profiles at the very top of the chat. So please make sure that you connect with us there as well if you have any follow-up questions, anything that you want to ask. Okay, here we go. So okay, so we're gonna go ahead, and Nikita has a good question that she threw into the chat. Would you say that offering equity instead of salary to bring people on board at the very early stages of a startup is the best way to move forward? Or one should find ways to avoid offering equity to build the team?
I would like to take this one as the technical programmer in the world. To me, and this happens all the time, and this drives me nuts. People so desperately and badly want someone to build their software for free. And let me make this abundantly clear. At the early stage of a business, equity is literally worthless. I can give you 1 million shares of my $0 company, and everyone wants someone to code for equity, which is basically write my code for free. So it's not about avoiding giving equity to maintain control. It's almost insulting to say, I'm not going to pay you, come work on my thing. By the way, we're not really good friends or partners. So if you can pay a salary, pay a freaking salary.
Yeah. So try.
Yeah.
Try if you can get people to work on your stuff. If you're such a visionary entrepreneur and such a good salesperson that you can go and try to convince people to do equity. I mean, so the reality is that 8 out of 10 startups fail, right? And so, and depending on what numbers you look at, some of those are 7, I've heard as high as 9, but I think I've personally held equity in probably 20 startups that I'd advise, and they give me a couple shares and things like that. Like one has actually paid me back something ever. And so it's a reasonable thing to do if you have no cash, but at the core, so if I were starting a new company today, I would go to Martinez and be like, hey, technically, is this viable? And then let's work on it together and let's try to prove viability and all that sort of stuff before either of us I jumped out a window and decided to start it. But I mean, give it a shot. I've heard some lawyers will work for equity, which is great because that's typically how lawyers get rich is, us doing C corps and intellectual property. But also don't be offended when people say no.
Thank you for answering that. We have a follow-up question regarding legal advice. And this question is asked by Rachel. From your experience, at what point is it imperative to bring in a legal advisor, whether in-house or not? What situations indicate the tipping point? And she also asked to please consider the funding as a real parameter.
So this is my advice, and from a lot of years of doing startups, but what Martinez said is correct. And I think where most people don't understand it. So I'm just going to tell you people on this call and anybody that watches this, super secret. Don't tell anybody else. All right. Just kidding. You guys can tell people. There is no rule that ever says that you can't start a pretend company and see whether you can find traction before you incorporate said company. And so finding that traction and finding whether or not your company is viable before you go into the legal world and before you decide to quit your day job, or before you decide to invest your own money, or before you do any of those things, is a really smart idea. Not everybody does that. I certainly didn't do that along the way. I don't think probably any of us did it.
No.
Yeah. Rosie didn't do shark research before. But, but when it comes to the time when you are ready to form a company and you're ready to have a business partnership and you're ready to issue equity, find a lawyer that you like, that you want to, and pay the damn money to get an operating agreement in place. I have seen companies fail because of the failure to get shit squared away when they're ready to go. Now, I think that the difference is that I see people that spend all this time, money, and energy on an idea that will never actually come to fruition. Prove your idea first, then when you're ready, actually bring in a legal advisor. I would say for me, like early on, hiring a lawyer is the one thing. If I start another company, I'm going to make damn sure that I do that on very early and make sure I have an operating agreement in place very early, and a rock solid operating agreement that everybody that is in the company feels solid about.
Thank you for answering that and clarifying for everybody. The next question I have is from Ian. He asks, how much do you feel the failure was one specific decision, or just a series of smaller suboptimal decisions, or just never got the break you needed?
That's a good question.
I'm going to go with an avalanche, not just a series, an avalanche of poor decision making. Everything from, again, going product first to, and so here's one thing I'll say. I don't know that a lot of it was like bad decisions. It was ignorance. It was, I didn't know how businesses worked. I didn't know how to run a company. I just thought certainly by starting this company, it will work out fantastically in my favor. And I never, this is something I did want to mention as just a general piece of advice is, if you've never been with a startup and you're thinking about making one, go work at a startup doing just about any job, because especially if it's a small startup, you're going to have 20 jobs anyway, and see how one is run. Even if that startup fails, you can watch how they fail and not make that mistake instead of running your own startup into the ground. And try to be around other startups, see how they work, actually learn that stuff, because no amount of schooling I happened to, which was not worth my time, money, or energy. That's 3 years of my life I'll never get back, but I do technically have a business degree. None of that talked about how to actually run a new company. Not one damn thing that I learned in school helped at all with running this company. And meanwhile, the first 2 weeks I worked here at CleverFunnel, I learned more about startups, small businesses, running a company correctly than I did in 3 years of school or of a year and a half of running my own company into the ground.
And if I could echo on that, what's so ironic is that CleverFunnel, the company that the three of us work with startups. So we see all the good, bad, and the ugly every day, and we are a startup ourselves. So it's kind of a full circle in the world that we're in right now. And I definitely think all of us on this call can take and apply the lessons that we learned into the clients that we help as well. So it literally is an ongoing full circle journey. I think that we're all on here as well.
Thank you for chiming in, Rosie. This isn't a question, it's more of a comment that was put into the chat here by Jamie, who's responding to Brady, and then I want to ask a follow-up question based on that. So Jamie tells Brady, no one can know all of the things needed to do well at starting a business, and the journey is much easier with others on a social emotional level. So my question based on this comment is, did any of you have a support system for your business? Were you just a solopreneur? You were trying to do everything? And if you were, now that you have seen all of the risks that you took at that time and you don't want to repeat that, do you have certain groups that you would recommend for new entrepreneurs to join so that they have more of that community and support that they may need?
So do you want to plug founders or should
Why
I?
don't you do it?
Yeah. So two of the big groups that were massively helpful and influential for me when I was just starting out was the first one was a group called Veterans and Residents. It's sort of like an incubator for veteran business owners. It's part of a larger organization called Bunker Labs, which is there to support veteran entrepreneurs. And if you are a military veteran or you have an immediate family member who is, you're eligible to join. And it is that support network was incredibly helpful. I definitely, and maybe that would have been a good thing, but at the time it didn't seem like it. Died much sooner as a business without that support network. The other big one, which is actually how I met Chris and how we ended up working together, is called Denver Founders Network, which I strongly recommend. I believe we're meeting quarterly now, and it is just a big group where you can meet and hang out with other founders, meet with other entrepreneurs, run ideas off of each other, network, learn some stuff, and yeah,
I mean, the only thing I'd add, so yeah, thank you for plugging Denver Founders. Like,
yeah.
But the other thing I would add is that this can be an incredibly lonely and painful journey. And the only thing I can guarantee you if you're going to be a founder is you're going to fail. Like, there's going to be failures. Even companies that are wildly successful fail and fail and fail and fail till they figure it out, right? And anybody that has studied any of the big unicorns or has an honest conversation with a founder will tell you about the failures and the pain and the struggle along those pathways. Whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a co-founder, whether it's a group of idiots that get together and drink beer once a quarter and talk about, the pain about being a founder, finding a tribe and finding a group of people that are there to support you, it's kind of got to be mandatory. Like, you just have to have it. Also acknowledging the fact that as an entrepreneur, you're much more likely to have mental health issues than the average person. After Denver, we talk about I talk about real good technologies, but as the first time in my life that I'd really truly been clinically depressed, didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to hang out with my kids. It was a very difficult and painful journey. Luckily, I have a loving family and I had a group of friends that were there to support me, but I also worry about this coming out of the pandemic. Make sure you're connected with a group of other founders, if nothing else, just to be like, yeah, this really sucks at times, doesn't it? It's super exciting at others, and I want to share my joy, but I also want to share those times when I'm really struggling. And you don't have to come to Denver Founders. There's all kinds of online stuff. There's all kinds of stuff there, but just make sure you have a community and a tribe there, because you don't want to do this work alone. It's too hard.
That's well said, Chris. Thank you. Yes, avoid the burnout. Have a support group, a system, friends, family, colleagues that you can talk to. My next question, actually, is another comment here. Jamie says, Chris's story seems so familiar. Techies think the product sells itself. Compound that with business people who can't find a techie to co-found with. And we have so much unrealized potential. So my follow-up question to that comment would be, when you are looking to strategize and find that business partner again, what are some things that you're looking for? Are you trying to maybe find somebody that has strengths in other areas versus your strengths? What does that look like for a successful company?
In a perfect world, and keep in mind, I won't say take any co-founder you can. That's the worst advice you possibly can. In a perfect world, though, you want people who have the skills, you don't. The worst, I always joke, the worst co-founder pair is the CEO COO who come from the same background and basically have the same skill set, and go start a company together. It ends up being a feedback loop that just drives itself straight into the ground.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing. Jay asks a really good question. When you're finding a partner that you can work well with, that's important. Has anyone done it with a spouse or personal partner? How did it work out?
Hell no.
No way.
Oh my God.
Strong, 0 stars. Do not recommend.
Yeah. I know people that do it incredibly well. My mom and dad are that way. They've been business partners for years. I know people that do it well. I just don't know how you do it. Like suddenly there's a fail, like you lose an account, or so, your software system goes down and you're arguing about who left their underwear on the floor. Like feels like that. I know there's special people that can do that, but I think those are very special relationships.
Yeah. You have to have a Lifetime movie grade, rock solid marriage to be able to run a company together and stay happily married.
But it's also true. Like I like that Jess is not in the startup world. Like I like that she's not part of this. And so when I come home and be like, yeah, this is fucked up, she's like, holy shit, that's super fucked up. Versus another startup partner to be like, you think that's fucked up? Let me tell you what happened to me today.
That's great. I will say some of the comments, somebody commented in here as well. No, don't start a business with a partner, a personal partner. Let's see. Someone else says, my parents have for years. My wife and I are partners. We have different skill sets, but then work on strategy, reviewing finances, et cetera, together. So it's up to, you, who you find as that partner. If you can manage that, I would personally think that it would add some stress to the relationship, but if you can, at the end of the day, separate that, I think that's great because you know each other really well. So you've already started that first kiss and the holding hands and everything, right? So you know each other.
You've already actually dated versus founder dated.
Right. Let's see. We have. I have a personal question also. My curiosity is, my background is in UX research. And so I wonder how important is that user research, that target audience research into your product, not only developing the product and marketing and launching it, but when you go to launch and these things, how do you prioritize that? I always try to push for telling companies, hey, you really need to work on the writing of your business and the research and what are you going to write and what words are you going to use and how are you going to figure out all of those words without the actual research. So my curiosity is that something that you would recommend for startups to invest in some type of research into their product development, or their customers?
I mean, yeah, in the big picture, yes, right? Like, so there's only, this is going to be way oversimplification, but there's only like 2 real sides to any startup. So you have a product or service and you have a bunch of humans. And the more deeply you understand those humans, the more deeply you understand the troubles, and the more deeply you understand what it is, what problem they're trying to solve, the better you can build that product. And again, traditional wisdom says build the product and go find the humans. I think we're hopefully telling you to do that in reverse. So, I mean, big picture, absolutely. The more you can do that and understand and invest in learning about your customers, I think you'll be much further along down the road than if you just throw a time tracking product into it.
And I do, though, also want to go back to this whole idea of if your only tool is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. If you're coming from a writing background or UX background, that doesn't mean writing in UX is going to solve every problem. It may feel like it because it's where your strength is. Just like code isn't going to solve every problem. Marketing is not going to solve every problem. I say that helping run a marketing agency, but you have to have all of the parts needed together. Not one of them is going to be the magic bullet. There is no magic bullet. Sorry to tell you this.
Oh, it's really great advice. I do have a follow-up question. What would those working parts be if all of you can just kind of take turns answering what you think those components are necessary? What are they?
As far as like what the components of a successful startup team
Yes.
look like? Yeah, I mean, you have, I failed for the exact wrong reason, like different reason that Chris failed. Like initially I had this really great technical idea and I couldn't find anybody to build it for me. So you have to have somebody to sell the stuff. You have to have somebody to build the stuff that you're going to sell, whether that's a service or a product. And I kind of think of those things similarly. And then it's pretty good idea to have somebody who actually knows just a little bit about the structure of business, whereby, you open a checking account and, get insurance and legal and things like that. A lot of people argue that maybe you want to have a finance person early. I don't necessarily think that's true. We have a good bookkeeper. It's usually sufficient.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for answering that. If anyone wants to tag in on that, please go ahead. We do have 8 more minutes. So I want to finish up here by asking, what are your main takeaways and the lessons that you learned?
I can answer that. My main takeaways for sure is I don't regret that I had a startup that failed. I think I learned a lot about business, myself. It 100% applies to everything that I do now. I know that was part of our topics through the description of this call, is how do we take what we learn and apply it to where we are now, right? With the business we're in. I'm 100% in my career in living the learning lesson, right? I'm helping other entrepreneurs, startups grow their companies from learning through myself, through my losses, my gains, etc. And for that, I don't regret anything. We all have to try things, we all have to take our passions. And if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, I think that's great. I mean, both Chris has elaborated on, the way that you have to have it laid out, ideally, before you really kick things off, but that's not how we all kind of kick things off, right? But we learn through those trials and errors in our life, and we move forward and we apply them. I 100% do still stand by marketing was my takeaway, and it is ironic that that's where I find myself in my career now. So I took that takeaway and I just went with it, and here I am. So that's what I'm going to leave that on for myself.
Thank you, Rosie.
I'm gonna say that one more just statement I want to make sure is, I don't want anyone leaving this panel thinking no one should ever start a business. This is all terrible and everyone's going to fail. What I do want people to take away is learn from the failures of others. Enough time has passed now that we can somewhat upbeatedly talk about running our startup into the ground. But the best thing you can do is arm yourself with whatever knowledge, with whatever experience you can before you go out on your own. Again, the thing I would recommend anyone thinking about starting a company is go work at an early stage company, see how it comes together before you try to do it yourself.
I feel like I could talk for 2 hours on this subject alone, but I think if I had to encapsulate that into a sentence, or sentence, how silly, multiple sentences, it would be, first of all, when you do this work, you do it because we love this work. And being a founder is the greatest job in the world. It's amazing. You get to wake up in the morning and control your own destiny in a way that almost nobody else gets. But failure is part of this journey. Acknowledging that failure is part of the journey. Acknowledge that this is a journey, and the end of one startup is the opening door for the next startup, or the next startup, or the next startup. And I think a perfect lesson is that the 2 other people on the call with me right now, is that we all work together, and I think we work together well because of our failures. I don't really like to have people that have never gone through some shit in their life, because I know that this company that we work with now, we're going to go through a hard time. We're going to go through multiple hard times. relationships come out of those things, lessons come out of those failures, grit and determination come out of those failures. But ultimately, if you just acknowledge this is a journey, failure is going to be a part of that journey, and acknowledge and accept that and use it to become not just a stronger founder, but a stronger person as well.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chris. I think that's all really great advice. So to summarize, I just want to make sure that we give the right advice to anybody listening today. And a lot of the things that we talked about were finding the right co-founder, having the right support system, network of other colleagues that you can talk to, setting up your business the right way, getting that business operations agreement from the get-go so that people know how they're going to get paid and who can take time off, and that's all agreed upon from the get-go. Finding also somebody who has different traits and skills, a different trait and skill set than you do, so that your tool belt is built out and you're not just carrying that hammer as Chris tried to drive there. And then also knowing that it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. Expect there to be some failure. Did I miss anything? Please go ahead and chime in if I did.
Oh, it's great. It's a great conversation. I think one of the things that I just encourage all of us as founders, like everybody within this community, is to talk about failure more. And it's okay. And we need to continue to embrace the fact that failure is part of this journey.
That's great. And I will say, I'm going to try to see if I find one last question here. Oh, here's a good question. Brady asks, do you guys think your experience and support system now will help you identify the next black swan problem before it sinks you?
Before it sinks you, probably. Will it help us? I don't think, whatever it is, we won't see it coming. But we will be better equipped to handle it.
Yeah, one of the fun things about these conversations is that the lesson of hindsight, like Rosie and I were talking about that before, like, oh, as you look back, like, holy shit, if I just would have done these 37 things differently. But, yeah, I think also knowing what bigger problems look like now probably will help too. It's big structural problems.
Somebody said hashtag failure for the win. People are they're saying thank you for this excellent session. I will say we have 2 minutes left. So I think it's really great if everyone just drops in their LinkedIn. If you're a part of the audience, please go ahead and connect with each other. We would love to connect with you as well. It's a great way to network. We aren't face-to-face. We would love to be face-to-face. There will be an event on Friday. And if you haven't signed up for that, that would be great. You would get to meet some of the people at Denver Founders, which I highly recommend as a resource here in Denver and joining that. So go ahead and thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I'll be at the happy hour at base camp tonight if anyone wants to meet face-to-face.
Have a beer, talk about failure.
Yeah, have a drink, talk about failure.
What time will you be there, Chris? Please let everyone know.
Yeah.
What time are you gonna be there?
It's 4 to 6.
There you go.
So over at the pavilions on 16th Street.
4 to 6 at base camp, the pavilions on 16th. If you all want to meet Chris. And I am quickly trying to click on everyone's LinkedIn here. So I definitely want to connect with everybody.
And thank you for moderating too, as well. You did a
thank
wonderful
you
job.
so
We
much.
appreciate it.
You're a badass.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think I got through it. The audience was really great too. We had some really great questions in there. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to connecting in real life. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.